I mean, I'm still just trying to wrap my head around this. If you had handed me this document without like a title page and asked me to guess the author, I would have assumed we were reading some radical economic manifesto.
Right. Yeah, I completely agree. The irony is just, well, it's impossible to ignore. You have the literal architects of advanced artificial intelligence publishing a policy brief that openly states the traditional economic playbook is fundamentally broken.
Totally broken. Like shatter the system broken. They are building the technology and in the exact same breath warning that it will essentially destroy the current system.
Exactly. I mean, they're calling for a massive government-led redistribution of wealth.
Yeah, let's talk about that public wealth fund proposal right out of the gate, because the authors explicitly lay out that as artificial intelligence takes over more human labor, our entire tax base is going to collapse.
Because it heavily relies on payroll taxes.
Right. And to prevent that collapse, they are pitching a total modernization of how governments collect revenue. So heavy shifts toward capital gains, corporate income, and even creating, brand new taxes specifically related to automated labor.
Well, just consider the mechanics of what happens without that intervention, right? If a major corporation replaces 50 human analysts with an autonomous AI system, the government suddenly loses 50 streams of income tax overnight.
Wow. Yeah, literally overnight.
And those are the streams funding Social Security, infrastructure, healthcare. So the proposal argues that you have to tax the sustained returns of that AI-driven productivity.
You capture the value of that automated labor.
Exactly. You capture it and distribute the financial upside directly to the public, regardless of whether a person owns tech stock or, has a massive investment portfolio.
And then they introduce the efficiency dividend, which, I had to read that paragraph twice. The concept is that the staggering productivity gains generated by AI shouldn't just vanish into corporate profit margins.
Right. They shouldn't just enrich the companies.
Instead, those gains should be structurally captured to guarantee a permanent 32-hour work week, like legally or culturally guaranteed, 4 days a week with absolutely no loss in pay for the human worker.
The core tension here is just profound. The creators of superintelligence are looking directly at regulators and saying, look, the free market alone will fail here.
Yeah.
You need to tax us, you need to regulate our models, and you need to build the state infrastructure to distribute this new wealth. They are openly admitting that the very tools they are building possess a gravity that will inherently concentrate power and wealth to a really dangerous extreme.
Unless industrial policy aggressively intervenes.
Right.
Okay, look, before we dive deeper into this, I want to take a quick second to set the ground rules for you listening. We are unpacking a document that proposes highly charged concepts: universal wealth redistribution, massive tax restructuring, deep state intervention in the private market.
Very heavy stuff.
Extremely. But we are not taking sides here. We are not endorsing these viewpoints, nor are we criticizing them. Our job today is entirely neutral. We are simply dissecting the architecture of the source material provided and trying to understand how this proposed future is actually supposed to function.
Yeah, our goal is pure analysis. We just want to map out the specific structural mechanisms they are projecting, leaving all the politics at the door.
Exactly the mission. So welcome to Deep Cuts and Deep Thinking. Today we are bringing you a deep dive into the OpenAI Industrial Policy Blueprint.
It's a fascinating document.
It really is. It's a strategic framework detailing an industrial policy for the intelligence age, focused on keeping human beings centered as the world transitions to superintelligence.
And that transition is the non-negotiable baseline of this text. The authors are no longer talking about AI as like a helpful chatbot that drafts your emails.
Right, we're way past that.
Way past. They define superintelligence as a tier of artificial intelligence capable of outperforming the absolute smartest human beings on the planet. And that is, even when those human beings are heavily assisted by other AI tools.
Let's put that scale into perspective, because the document points out a terrifyingly fast evolution. Just a few years ago, we were amazed when an AI could complete a narrow task that took a human, a few minutes.
Yeah, like summarizing an article.
Exactly. Now, what they call frontier models are shifting toward carrying out complex, multi-layered projects that would normally take a human being months to finish. Actually, let's pause right there. Define frontier model for me, just so we are totally clear on the terminology.
Sure. So a frontier model is the absolute bleeding edge of artificial intelligence research. It refers to the most advanced, highly capable foundation models that push the boundaries of what AI can do, often demonstrating really unexpected capabilities.
Okay, so when a frontier model can execute a month-long project entirely autonomously.
Like conducting a sprawling scientific literature review, running simulations, and drafting a patent all on its own.
Right. When it can do that, it fundamentally rewrites how knowledge is produced and how human labor is valued.
And that is exactly why the authors lean so heavily into historical comparisons. They look at the industrial age, the progressive era, the New Deal. Those were eras where democratic societies realized that technologies like mass production and the combustion engine required a total rewrite of the social contract.
Okay, but I have to push back a little on their core premise here. Historically, when a new technology makes things like energy or healthcare or essential goods dramatically cheaper and more abundant, well, capitalism usually sorts it out, right?
But the traditional view.
New industries emerge, new jobs are created. So why does the OpenAI strategic framework specifically insist that the free market is essentially unequipped to handle this specific transition without like a massive public wealth fund?
The distinction lies in the velocity and the breadth of the disruption. During the Industrial Revolution, the transition took generations. A blacksmith had time to realize his trade was dying and, encourage his children to become mechanics.
Right. It was a slow burn.
Exactly. But the document argues that market forces are insufficient here because this transition is happening concurrently across almost every cognitive domain practically overnight.
So the speed is the killer.
The speed and the concentration. Without a massive state intervention, AI will aggressively widen inequality. The economic gains will naturally pool within a tiny oligopoly of firms that own the compute power and the frontier models.
Meanwhile, everyday workers might become insanely productive using these tools, but the financial rewards of that productivity will bypass them completely.
Right. The free market lacks a built-in mechanism to redistribute the hyperabundance created by an intelligence that operates at practically zero marginal cost.
So that necessitates an industrial policy to forcefully align private innovation with public stability.
Through research funding, targeted regulation, and completely new safety nets. Yeah.
Which brings us to the granular mechanics of how they actually plan to build this open economy. Because the first pillar they introduce is establishing a right to AI.
Yeah, the authors argue that access to foundational AI models must be treated as a basic utility, just like global literacy, electricity, or broadband internet.
So if you don't have it, you're shut out.
Basically. If an individual or a community lacks access to these systems, they are functionally exiled from the modern economy. The blueprint advocates for ensuring a baseline level of superintelligence is broadly available.
Either free or heavily subsidized, right?
Right, to guarantee underserved communities aren't permanently locked out of the next economic era.
And for the people whose jobs are inevitably displaced by those same models, they propose what they call adaptive safety nets. I mean, I found the mechanics of this brilliant. They aren't just calling for better unemployment insurance.
No, they want to automate the safety net itself so it responds in real time.
Which is crazy when you think about how broken the current relief system is. Politicians often spend months debating a relief bill while a local economy just bleeds out.
It's way too slow. But this blueprint proposes wiring the safety net directly to real-time public metrics.
Yeah.
So imagine a system tracking industry-specific job displacement in a particular region.
Okay.
When that metric spikes and hits a predefined threshold, acting as a lead indicator of localized economic stress, a specialized package of expanded safety nets activates immediately.
Instantly. Like cash assistance, wage insurance, training vouchers, or expanded SNP benefits just deploy?
Instantly. And as those local economic conditions stabilize and the metrics drop back below the threshold, the expanded benefits automatically phase out.
It creates a targeted, time-bound, and entirely depoliticized safety net.
Exactly.
That dynamic element solves so much administrative bottleneck, but they also address the long-term structure of employment through portable benefits, because in the current era, so much of a person's fundamental security is tethered to a single employer.
Your health insurance, your retirement matching.
Yeah, it all vanishes if you lose your job. So the blueprint pushes to decouple that entirely. Here is how I am visualizing this for you listening. It is almost like attaching your life's safety net to your passport rather than your corporate ID badge.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Right. The benefits follow you across different jobs, across changing industries, or into independent contracting fully funded by these new corporate tax structures we talked about earlier.
That passport analogy captures the mechanism perfectly, because employment in the intelligence age will be highly fluid, and people need structural cushioning to pivot.
And pivot into what, exactly?
Well, the document envisions new pathways for people to pivot into entrepreneurship. For one, they propose support structures for AI-first entrepreneurs. This includes microgrants and a concept they call startup in a box.
Startup in a box? That sounds wild.
It's the idea of using AI to vaporize the traditional administrative friction of starting a business. The AI handles the complex accounting, the procurement, the legal contract drafting.
So it allows a person with deep domain expertise in, say, plumbing or graphic design to spin up a fully compliant company overnight.
Yeah, without needing a whole team of lawyers and accountants.
But what about the millions of people who have zero interest in running a startup? The document places a massive emphasis on pathways to human-centered work, right?
Yes, they heavily highlight the care and connection economy. So childcare, elder care, education. The framework suggests utilizing family benefits to formally recognize caregiving as highly valuable economic work.
Okay, so putting all these pieces together for you listening,
Yeah.
The blueprint essentially proposes decoupling human survival from traditional labor.
Yes.
If an autonomous system entirely automates your accounting job, your healthcare doesn't evaporate, your retirement is secure, and you are financially cushioned to transition into something uniquely human-centered or launch a micro business, all subsidized by the sustained returns of the AI that took your old job.
It's a remarkably cohesive economic vision. However, wealth redistribution and portable benefits are completely irrelevant if the society itself collapses under the weight of the technology.
Right, which forces a pivot to the darker, much more urgent side of this blueprint, managing the extreme threat landscape.
Yeah, the document draws a very sharp distinction between upstream safeguards and post-deployment resilience.
Upstream is what dominates the news right now, right? Like testing models in a laboratory environment, red teaming them for vulnerabilities before they are released.
Exactly. But the authors stress that upstream testing is no longer sufficient. Upstream testing is essentially ensuring a vehicle's brakes function correctly before it leaves the manufacturing plant.
Okay, so what is post-deployment resilience?
Post-deployment resilience is the infrastructure required to monitor millions of those vehicles operating in the wild under totally unpredictable conditions. As AI systems become wildly capable and embed themselves into global critical infrastructure, they must be monitored continuously. The framework approaches advanced AI not merely as typical software, but as something closer to a biological pathogen or nuclear material.
It demands active, real-world containment protocols. Let's slow down and really paint a picture of that, because the model containment playbook section is deeply unsettling. What does a failure scenario actually look like that requires a containment playbook?
Well, the nightmare scenario involves the core model waits the actual mathematical brain of a highly advanced AI being leaked, stolen by a rogue state, or autonomously replicating across decentralized servers without human oversight.
Autonomously replicating. So if an AI capable of hacking financial networks or generating novel biological weapons escapes the lab, traditional software patches are basically useless.
Completely useless. The containment playbooks outline the brutal real-world constraints of limiting the spread of those capabilities, coordinating emergency international responses, and physically isolating compromised infrastructure.
They acknowledge that perfect containment might be impossible, right?
They do. But pre-planned, coordinated action can mean the difference between a localized incident and a global catastrophe.
And to fight those threats, they also propose safety systems for emerging risks, which is quite literally fighting fire with fire.
Yeah, they suggest using tightly controlled advanced AI to anticipate and defend against cyber and biological threats generated by bad actors.
They envision AI systems capable of rapidly identifying a novel pathogen and instantly mass-producing medical countermeasures,
alongside managing strategic stockpiles of essential supplies. But monitoring systems with that level of power requires intense verification, which introduces the concept of the AI trust stack.
The trust stack, right? Because if an autonomous model is drafting legal decisions, generating educational content, or operating a power grid, society needs an immutable record of its actions.
Exactly. The trust stack relies heavily on developing provenance standards and privacy-preserving logging.
Define provenance standards for me. Are we just talking about, like, a digital watermark?
It goes a lot deeper than a simple watermark. Provenance standards are cryptographic proofs embedded into the data itself. They allow anyone to verify the origin and the entire alteration history of a piece of digital content or an automated decision.
So it proves definitively whether an output was generated by a human, a specific AI model, or an AI imitating a human.
Spot on.
But the immediate concern I have when you mention logging every AI action is the creation of a pervasive dystopian surveillance state. I mean, nobody wants that.
And the blueprint explicitly addresses that trap through privacy-preserving logging.
How does that work?
The architecture is designed to capture the metadata of a system's behavior.
Yes.
So the pathways it took to reach a decision without scraping the sensitive human data it actually interacted with.
Oh, I see.
It creates a forensic trail so auditors can trace exactly where a failure occurred and assign liability without giving a government agency a backdoor to read citizens' private emails.
Okay, that makes sense. And to oversee this incredibly complex trust stack, the document emphasizes the need for intense auditing regimes. They highlight a proposed institution called the Center for AI Standards and Innovation. The goal is to cultivate a ruthless, highly competitive market of independent auditors whose entire business model is to stress test these frontier models.
Which is absolutely necessary.
But this naturally raises the biggest red flag of the entire deep dive. If these systems require such immense auditing, containment protocols, and government intervention, who exactly watches the watchmen?
The classic problem.
How do we prevent regulatory capture? How do we ensure that the 3 or 4 massive tech companies building superintelligence don't just use all this proposed policy to cement an unbreakable monopoly?
Well, regulatory capture is the Achilles heel of any industrial policy. And to preempt this, the blueprint demands mission-aligned corporate governance. They argue that companies developing frontier AI cannot operate as traditional corporations. They must adopt structures like public benefit corporations.
What does that actually change legally? Isn't a public benefit corporation just, a branding exercise?
No, it fundamentally rewrites a company's legal obligations. A traditional corporation has a strict fiduciary duty to maximize profit for its shareholders. If they sacrifice profit for a vague concept of public safety, they can actually be sued by their investors.
Wow, okay.
But a public benefit corporation is legally protected, and in fact mandated, to balance shareholder returns with a defined public good. Furthermore, the blueprint insists these structures must be heavily fortified against internal corporate capture.
Meaning what?
They want the physical infrastructure and the model weights secured so intensely that no single rogue faction of executives or engineers can quietly bypass safety protocols to concentrate power.
That's intense.
It also requires the process of alignment, ensuring the AI's goals match human values to include structured public input, rather than just relying on the moral compass of a few developers in a closed laboratory.
They even demand guardrails on their own biggest client. I mean, the document outlines guardrails for government use, insisting on high standards for reliability when the state deploys AI.
Yeah, they flipped the script. They propose that AI be used to strengthen democratic accountability.
Like modernizing the Freedom of Information Act. Using AI to log and categorize government actions so watchdog organizations can utilize their own AI models to audit state behavior at scale.
It is a fascinating dynamic.
It really is. Here's where it gets really interesting for you as a listener. You have a developer practically begging to be audited, asking for legal mandates to force their competitors to prioritize safety, and demanding strict limitations on how the government can weaponize the technology.
Because the systemic risk is simply too immense for self-regulation. Importantly, the policy brief acknowledges this cannot be an isolated domestic effort. They outline a critical need for international coordination and incident reporting, proposing a global network of AI institutes.
And a key mechanism of this network is near-miss reporting, like the aviation industry, right?
Precisely. In commercial aviation, if two aircraft experience a near miss, the data isn't buried to protect an airline's reputation. It is reported, analyzed, and disseminated globally, so the entire industry patches the vulnerability before a fatal crash occurs.
And the document insists the AI industry must adopt that exact same culture.
Yes. If a frontier model demonstrates deceptive behavior during a closed test, or discovers a novel method to bypass a safety protocol, that data must be shared securely across the global network.
But the authors point out a massive legal barrier to that kind of cooperation. They are demanding antitrust safe harbors. Because in today's world, if the CEOs of the top artificial intelligence firms hold secret meetings to share deeply technical data about their algorithms,
regulators will immediately launch investigations for collusion and monopolistic behavior.
Right. The policy framework argues that these companies need clear legal exemptions to share safety and threat vector data without triggering devastating antitrust lawsuits.
The legal friction just demonstrates how entirely unequipped our current institutions are for this era. We're attempting to govern autonomous superintelligence using legal frameworks built for the combustion engine and the early days of the World Wide Web.
It's wild to think about.
The underlying thesis of the OpenAI strategic framework is that patching the old system is a fool's errand. Society must construct an entirely new architecture from the ground up, rooted in transparency, automated wealth distribution, and hyper-vigilant international safety networks.
It is an incredibly ambitious, almost overwhelming vision of the future. But there is a glaring, unresolved tension hanging over this entire blueprint.
Yeah, the global aspect.
Right. The strategic framework focuses heavily on the United States and allied democracies as a starting point, while repeatedly acknowledging that the ultimate solution must be flawlessly global. So I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over as you digest all of this.
It's a big one.
If this incredibly ambitious industrial policy requires strict, expensive safety audits, heavy taxes on automated labor, and a legally guaranteed 32-hour work week, what happens if one nation adopts this blueprint, but competing nations decide to reject the rules? What if they engage in a relentless, unregulated, tax-free AI arms race instead?
That's the terrifying unknown.
Can an open, people-first economy actually survive in a fragmented global landscape where the competitors just refuse to play by the same rules?
It's the defining question of the intelligence age.
If you found this podcast interesting, please like and subscribe.